People often said their story felt like something out of real life, not a movie. Nothing dramatic on the surface. No loud romance. No public fights. Just a calm relationship that moved forward quietly, almost too smoothly. From the outside, it looked perfect. He was known as a confident man. He spoke with certainty, walked with purpose, and always seemed to know what he wanted. Friends admired how organized he was. He talked about goals, success, and stability. To many, he looked like someone who had life figured out. She was different, quiet, observant. She didn't talk much about herself. When people asked questions, she answered politely, but briefly. She listened more than she spoke. Some people thought she was shy. Others thought she was simply very respectful. They met through family connections. It wasn't a dramatic meeting. No instant sparks that people talk about. Just a simple introduction that slowly turned into conversations. At first, their talks were polite and formal. Over time, he started leading the conversations more. He shared his plans, his ideas, his expectations for life. She listened carefully. He liked that about her. He often said he appreciated how easy she was. No arguments. No emotional pressure. When he made suggestions, she nodded. When he decided on something, she didn't push back. To him, this felt like understanding. It felt like compatibility. In reality, it was something else entirely. As weeks passed, the relationship moved quickly. He believed in efficiency. He didn't like wasting time. If something felt right, he wanted to move forward without delay. Engagement was discussed early. Marriage followed soon after. Families were involved. Meetings were held. Everyone spoke about values, respect, and future plans. He talked confidently about providing, protecting, and leading. People admired his seriousness. She spoke very little during these meetings when asked about her expectations. She said she wanted peace, honesty, and mutual respect. Nothing more. Nothing complicated. People smiled and said she was simple. He liked that word. As wedding preparations began, his focus shifted. He became more serious about details that others didn't notice. Money, property, responsibility. He spoke often about how hard he had worked to build his life. He reminded people that success doesn't come easy, and that one mistake can ruin everything. She listened. As always, one evening while discussing wedding arrangements, he brought up something that changed the tone of the conversation. His voice stayed calm, but his words were firm. He said it was important to protect what he had built. He said trust was important, but planning was smarter. He mentioned a prenup. She didn't react immediately. He explained it as if it was a normal step. Something modern couples do. Something practical people understand. He said it wasn't about lack of trust. It was about being responsible. She looked at him quietly. He expected questions. Maybe hesitation. Perhaps a bit of emotion. But she didn't give him any of that. Instead, she asked him to explain it clearly. That surprised him. He went into detail. He talked about ownership, about future risks, about keeping things fair. He explained how the document would protect him if things ever went wrong. He spoke carefully, choosing words that made him sound reasonable and mature. She listened from start to finish. When he finished, he waited. She nodded and said she understood. No argument. No disagreement. No visible emotion. Inside, he felt relieved. He told himself this confirmed what he already believed. She was sensible. She wasn't emotional. She understood reality. He felt proud of how smoothly things were going. What he didn't know was that her calm had nothing to do with agreement. That night, she went home and sat alone for a long time. Not crying. Not angry. Just thinking. She replayed every conversation in her mind. The confidence in his voice, the way he spoke about his future, the way he assumed things without asking. She wasn't surprised. She had seen this side of. People before her, life before him, had taught her one important lesson. Not everyone who speaks loudly holds real power, and not everyone who stays quiet is weak. She didn't call anyone. She didn't ask for advice. She didn't need reassurance. Everything she needed was already in order. Her life had been structured. Long before she met him, quietly, carefully, through decisions made by people who believed in planning without showing off. Assets placed under proper legal protection. Documents prepared years ago. Everything clean. Everything lawful. But none of that was part of this moment. What mattered now was understanding who she was about to marry. The days passed. Wedding plans continued. Guests were invited. Clothes were chosen. Smiles were exchanged. He became more relaxed. The prenup in his mind had settled an important concern. He felt secure, confident, in control. He noticed how calm she was during preparations. No stress, no excitement either. Just quiet cooperation at times. He wondered why she'd never ask questions about finances or property. He took it as proof that she trusted him completely. He never thought it could mean something else. When the prenup papers were finally prepared, he presented them without hesitation. He explained again why it mattered. He made sure to mention how fair the terms were. She took the papers in her hands. She read them carefully, slowly, line by line. Not because she was confused, but because she respected the process. He watched her, confident and relaxed. She didn't rush. When she finished reading, she looked up and said she was ready. That moment should have felt ordinary, but it wasn't. Because while he believed he was protecting his future, she was learning something far more valuable. She was learning exactly how he viewed partnership, and that understanding would shape everything that came next. After the prenup discussion, life appeared normal on the surface. Wedding preparations continued as planned. Invitations were sent. Dates were finalized. Families stayed busy with arrangements. To everyone watching, it looked like two people calmly moving toward marriage. But something had shifted quietly. He felt lighter. The conversation about the prenup had given him a sense of control. He believed he had handled an uncomfortable topic in a smart way. In his mind, this proved he was responsible and forward-thinking. He even felt proud that there had been no argument, no drama, no resistance. He told a close friend that he was lucky. He said his future wife understood reality, that she wasn't emotional like others, that she trusted him. He never noticed how carefully she had chosen her silence. She, on the other hand, became more observant than ever. Not suspicious, just aware. She watched how he spoke to people, how he talked about money, how easily the word mine came to his lips. She listened when he joked about being the one who made decisions in the house. She smiled politely each time. Inside, she was learning. As the wedding drew closer, he started giving instructions more often. He decided which guests would be invited. He chose the venue. He spoke confidently about where they would live after marriage. When relatives suggested alternatives, he dismissed them kindly but firmly. She didn't object. Some people praised her patience. Others whispered that she was too quiet. But no one thought to ask what she was thinking. At home, she spent her evenings peacefully. She read, she wrote. Sometimes she simply sat by the window, reflecting. There was no panic in her heart, no fear of the future, just clarity. She understood something important. People reveal their true selves not through big actions, but through small, repeated behaviors. He believed marriage meant leadership. He believed love worked best when one person guided the direction. He believed his role was to decide, and hers was to support. She let him believe that. The prenup documents were finalized a few days later. He informed her confidently, as if announcing a routine appointment. He said they should get it signed soon so there would be no last-minute stress. She agreed. The day they went to sign the papers was quiet. No arguments. No raised voices. Just two people sitting across from legal documents. He explained the key points again. Even though she had already read everything carefully, he spoke slowly, almost like a teacher. He wanted to make sure she understood the seriousness of it all. She listened respectfully. When it was time to sign, she didn't hesitate. She held the pen steadily. Her hand didn't shake. Her expression didn't change. That calm unsettled him for a brief moment. He expected at least some emotion. A pause, a question, but there was none. She signed quietly and placed the pen down. He felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction in his mind. This was proof that he was in control of his future. He didn't notice that she read the last page twice after signing. They left together. He spoke casually, already thinking ahead. He talked about honeymoon plans and future investments. He laughed, relaxed now that this important matter was settled. She responded when necessary. Short replies, soft tone. That evening, she returned home alone. She sat down with a cup of tea and replayed the day in her mind. Not with regret, not with anger. Just awareness. She had given him exactly what he expected. What he didn't realize was that signing the paper had cost her nothing. Her life had never depended on his assets. Her stability had never come from what he owned. Long before this relationship, decisions had been made to protect her future quietly and legally. Everything was structured in a way that didn't require approval, explanation, or permission. But she didn't think about those details now. What mattered was trust, and trust, she was realizing, meant different things to different people. For him, trust meant agreement. For her, trust meant honesty. As wedding day approached, his confidence grew. He spoke more openly about finances. He joked about how organized everything was. He hinted, sometimes indirectly, that he was glad they had handled things properly. She nodded each time at family gatherings. He spoke proudly about planning ahead. Elders praised his responsibility. They admired how mature he was. She sat quietly beside him, smiling when appropriate. Inside, she felt no bitterness. Just understanding. She realized that some people feel powerful not because they are secure, but because they are afraid of losing control. He had mistaken her silence for weakness. In reality, she was simply choosing the right moment. The wedding day finally arrived. Everything went smoothly. The ceremony was beautiful. Guests were happy. Smiles filled the room. He looked confident standing beside her. He felt successful, accomplished. She stood calmly, composed, aware of everything and yet revealing nothing. After marriage, life settled into routine quickly. He returned to work. She adjusted to the new environment. He made decisions about daily matters without much discussion. She allowed it. He believed marriage was exactly as he imagined it. But small signs began to appear. Unnoticed by him, he started taking bigger risks at work. New ventures, bigger investments. He spoke confidently about growth and expansion. He assumed success would follow as it always had. She listened. She noticed how quickly confidence can turn into carelessness. Still, she said nothing, because she understood that real change doesn't begin with arguments. It begins when truth meets reality, and that moment was quietly approaching. Married life began quietly. There was no dramatic change overnight, no sudden shift that outsiders could notice. To friends and relatives, everything seemed stable. They saw a couple settling into routine, adjusting to shared life. From the outside, it looked balanced. Inside the house, however, patterns slowly became clearer. He liked structure. Every morning followed a plan. Work hours, calls, meetings, dinners. He spoke about his schedule often, almost proudly. He expected the home to adapt around his rhythm. Meals were planned according to his timing. Decisions about weekends were made with his work in mind. She adjusted without complaint at first. He appreciated this even more. He often told himself how fortunate he was. He believed many marriages failed because women asked for too much. In his mind, peace came from control, and control came from clarity. He felt he had both. She observed how easily he slipped into certainty, how naturally he assumed agreement. If he decided something, he spoke as if it were already settled. He rarely asked what she preferred. When he did, it was usually after the decision was already made. She answered calmly each time, not because she didn't have opinions, but because she was learning. She noticed how he spoke about money now that they were married. He referred to finances confidently. He discussed investments, risks, and returns as if success were guaranteed. He spoke about the future in firm sentences, never leaving room for doubt. She listened carefully sometimes. During dinner, he would mention how good it was that they had signed the prenup early. He said it casually, like a reminder of his wisdom. He believed it showed responsibility. He believed it proved maturity. She never responded to those comments. Her silence made him more comfortable. As weeks passed, his work demands increased. He stayed out late more often. Phone calls extended into the night. He spoke excitedly about expansion, about taking bold steps. He believed growth required courage. She noticed how often he ignored warnings from others, how easily he dismissed advice that didn't match his vision. At home, she remained steady. She kept the house calm. She made sure nothing added pressure. He appreciated this deeply. He believed she was supporting him fully in truth. She was preparing herself emotionally. She understood something many people learn too late. Confidence without caution can become danger. One evening, he came home visibly stressed. He tried to hide it at first, but the signs were clear. His voice was sharper, his movements quicker. He talked less about success and more about problems. She didn't question him immediately. Over the next few days, similar evenings followed. Short conversations, long silences. He began mentioning delays, complications, unexpected obstacles. He still sounded confident, but something underneath had changed. She noticed. Eventually, started speaking openly about pressure, about deals not going as planned, about money being tied up longer than expected. He still believed everything would work out, but the certainty was weaker now. She listened, as always. One night he spoke about needing flexibility. He said sometimes partners need to help each other. He said marriage was about standing together in difficult times. She agreed calmly. That's small. Agreement encouraged him. Soon after, he began asking subtle questions. Not directly, just casually. He asked about her savings, about her past work, about whether she had ever invested in anything. She answered carefully. She told him she was stable, that she managed her matters responsibly, that she believed in planning quietly. He didn't press further in his mind. Her stability still depended on him. As pressure at work increased, his tone at home changed slightly. He became more serious, more controlling. He asked more questions about spending. He monitored expenses closely. She didn't resist. He believed this was leadership. One weekend, he spoke openly about a new opportunity, a risky one. He said it could solve many problems at once. He sounded hopeful again, almost excited, but there was a condition. He needed support. He explained that certain things would move faster if he could show shared commitment. He said lenders trusted families more. He hinted that her involvement could make things easier. She listened quietly for the first time since marriage. She asked him a direct question. She asked how much risk he was taking. He answered confidently. He said risk was part of success. He said hesitation was for people who never achieve anything. She nodded slowly. That night, she stayed awake longer than usual. Not worried, but thoughtful. She reflected on everything she had observed since the beginning. His confidence, his need for control, his assumption that silence meant agreement. She realized something. It's important. He had never truly asked who she was. He had never wondered about her past beyond what suited his comfort. He had never asked what she brought into the marriage beyond emotional support. And she had allowed that, not because she was hiding, but because he had never shown interest in knowing in the days that followed. He became more open about needing help. He mentioned using her name for documents. He spoke about how marriage made things simpler legally. He framed it as teamwork. She listened. She didn't refuse. She didn't agree. She simply said she needed to understand everything clearly. That response unsettled him. He wasn't used to that kind of pause from her. For the first time, he felt uncertainty. He realized he didn't fully know where she stood. Meanwhile, She felt calm, because the moment she had been waiting for was beginning to form. Not a moment of anger, not a moment of confrontation, but a moment of truth. She understood that truth doesn't need to be announced loudly. It reveals itself naturally. When the time is right, and that time was drawing closer, the weeks that followed were heavier than before. Not loud or chaotic, just heavy in a quiet way. The kind of pressure that doesn't show on the face immediately, but slowly changes the way a person breathes, speaks, and thinks. He tried to keep his routine the same. Early mornings, late nights, phone calls that lasted longer than usual, meetings that stretched into weekends. He still spoke with confidence, but now there were pauses in his sentences. Moments where he searched for words. She noticed everything. She noticed how often he checked his phone, how he sat silently at the table sometimes, staring at nothing, how his shoulders looked tense even when he tried to relax. She didn't ask questions. Right away, she understood that when people are under pressure, they reveal more than they intend to. At home, she remained calm. She kept the environment steady. Meals were on time. The house was quiet. She didn't add stress. He appreciated this more than ever. He told himself she was the reason he could still focus. He didn't realize she was watching closely. One evening, spoke more openly than before. He said business wasn't moving as expected. He blamed market conditions, delays, other people's mistakes. He said things would improve soon. She listened. He expected reassurance. She gave it, but carefully. She told him that pressure passes and patience matters. Her words were gentle, not dramatic. That calmness made him feel safe, and safety made him speak more. Over the next few days, he began sharing details he had never mentioned before. Numbers, deadlines, commitments. He talked about obligations piling up. She absorbed everything quietly. At the same time, she noticed something else. His language had changed. Earlier, he spoke about my plans. Now he spoke about our situation. Earlier, he spoke about protection. Now he spoke about partnership. She understood the shift. One night, he brought up the prenup again. Not directly criticizing it, but mentioning how it had been a smart decision at the time. He said it showed maturity. She agreed politely. Then he added something new. He said sometimes documents need flexibility when life changes. She looked at him calmly. She asked what he meant. He hesitated, then explained that certain opportunities required trust between spouses. That shared names on papers made things easier. That sometimes rigid agreements slow progress. He framed it carefully. Like a reasonable thought. She didn't respond immediately. That silence made him comfortable. He had grown used to her quick agreement. Finally, she asked a simple question. She asked whether he would have suggested it's the same thing if the situation were reversed. He paused. He laughed lightly and said it wasn't the same. She nodded, as if she understood, but inside, she understood something else entirely. She saw clearly now that fairness mattered only when it benefited him. Days passed. Pressure increased. Calls became more urgent. He came home later, more exhausted. Sometimes he spoke sharply without realizing it. She didn't take it personally. She knew stress changes behavior. One evening, he asked directly if she could help. He said marriage meant sharing burdens. He said he would never let her suffer if roles were reversed. His voice was sincere. She believed he meant it. But sincerity doesn't always equal fairness. She told him she needed clarity before agreeing to anything. She said she wanted to see everything clearly. That answer frustrated him. He tried to hide it, but it showed. He asked why she suddenly needed details. He reminded her that they were married. That trust should be enough. She responded calmly. She said trust grows with transparency. That word unsettled him. Transparency. It made him uncomfortable because he wasn't used to offering it fully. That night, the distance between them felt different. Not emotional distance, but awareness. Both realized something had changed. In the following days, he became more cautious in his words. He didn't push as hard, but the pressure didn't disappear. He began assuming she would help eventually. She didn't correct that assumption. Instead, she prepared herself. She reviewed documents quietly. She organized papers that had been untouched for years. She refreshed her memory about structures put in place long ago. Everything was clear. Everything was secure. But she didn't feel proud. She felt calm. She didn't see this as winning or losing. She saw it as understanding. One afternoon, he came home earlier than usual. He looked tired. More than before? He sat down and spoke honestly for the first time. He said he needed help soon. He said things were reaching a point where delays could cause serious problems. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked him one final question. She asked if he had ever wondered why she never argued. About money, he looked confused. He said he thought she trusted him completely. She smiled softly. She said trust and independence can exist together. That sentence stayed with him. He didn't fully understand it yet, but he would, because the moment when assumptions meet reality was no longer far away, and when it arrived, nothing would feel the same. The tension in the house no longer hid itself behind silence. It was not loud, not explosive, but it was present in every small moment. In the pauses between conversations, in the way he sighed before speaking, in the way she waited before responding. He was reaching a point he had never faced before. For years, things had gone his way. Decisions had worked out. Risks had paid off. Confidence had been rewarded. Now, for the first time, uncertainty stood in front of him, and he didn't know how to handle it. He began waking up earlier than usual. Sleep didn't come easily anymore. His mind was filled with numbers, deadlines, and conversations that hadn't gone as planned. Even when he sat quietly, his thoughts were restless. She noticed how he rubbed his forehead when reading messages, how his tone softened when he spoke to her now, how his earlier authority had slowly turned into need. One morning, he spoke more gently than before. He said he appreciated her patience. He said not many people would stay calm under pressure. He said he felt lucky to have her. She listened. But she didn't let those words distract her. She knew appreciation, spoken under pressure, can sometimes be temporary. Later that day, he finally said what he had been circling around for weeks. He said he needed her help officially. He said things would move faster if certain assets were shown as shared. He said it was just a formality. He avoided her eyes while speaking. She asked him to explain clearly. He talked about banks, about approvals, about trust. He spoke about how being married meant standing together, especially in difficult times. She asked him one thing. She asked if this situation had existed before marriage. Would he have still insisted on the prenup? He didn't answer right away. That silence gave her all the confirmation she needed. Still, she didn't confront him. She simply told him she would think about it. That answer made him uneasy. He had expected agreement, or at least reassurance. Instead, he got patience. Over the next few days, he became restless. He checked in with her more often. He asked if she had thought about it. He tried to explain again, this time with more emotion. He said he felt alone in the situation. She listened carefully. She noticed how his words shifted. Earlier, he spoke about responsibility. Now, he spoke about fear. Fear of losing everything he had worked for. She felt no anger. She felt clarity. One evening, she told him she was ready to talk seriously. She asked him to bring all the documents he wanted her to review. She said she wanted full understanding before agreeing to anything. He felt relieved. He believed progress was finally happening. They sat together at the table. Papers spread out, numbers written neatly. He explained each page carefully, pointing to figures and timelines. His voice shook slightly at times, but he tried to stay composed. She listened without interrupting. She asked questions. Simple ones. Clear ones. Questions he hadn't expected. He struggled to answer some of them. Not because he didn't know, but because he hadn't considered those angles that made him uncomfortable. He realized she was not as unaware as he once believed. After reviewing everything, she closed the folder gently. She told him she understood the situation. He waited. Then she said something that changed the tone of the room. She said help should never be asked through pressure. She said partnership should not depend on convenience. Her voice was calm. Not accusing, he felt defensive. He said he had never pressured her. He said he only trusted her. He said he thought marriage meant sharing everything. She nodded. Then she reminded him of how confident he had been before the wedding. How sure he was about protecting his side. How firm he was about control. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't accuse. She simply stated facts. That made it harder for him to argue. He realized he was facing a version of her he hadn't seen before. Not emotional, not silent, but clear. That night, he struggled to sleep. His mind replayed the conversation again and again. He felt confused. He felt exposed. For the first time, he wondered whether he had misunderstood her from the beginning. She, on the other hand, slept peacefully because she knew the next step could not be rushed. The following days were quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Heavy with understanding, he didn't push anymore. He waited, and waiting made him anxious. One afternoon, she told him she had something important to share. She said it would explain many things. He felt nervous. He had no idea what was coming. She told him they should sit somewhere calm and talk. Properly, her tone was steady, not threatening, not emotional, just firm. That was when he realized something crucial. The conversation he had been avoiding was finally about to happen, and once it did, nothing would remain the same. The day she chose to speak, the house felt different from the moment he walked in. Nothing had changed on the surface. The rooms looked the same. The furniture was untouched. But there was a stillness in the air that made him uneasy. She asked him to sit with her. Not in the usual place where they discussed daily matters, but at the table where important conversations happened. Her voice was calm, steady. There was no anger in it. That calm made him nervous. He sat down, trying to read her face. She didn't avoid his eyes. She didn't stare either. She looked at him the way someone looks when they are about to explain something carefully. She began by saying she wanted honesty between them. She said she believed marriage should be built on truth, even when truth is uncomfortable. He nodded, sure of where this was going. She reminded him of the day he brought up the prenup. She spoke about how confident he was, how certain he sounded, how strongly he believed in protecting himself. She didn't criticize him. She simply described the moment. He listened quietly. Then she spoke about herself for the first time in a way she never had before. She said her silence had never meant dependence. She said she had learned early in life that peace sometimes comes from not explaining yourself to people who are not ready to listen. He felt his chest tighten. She reached for a folder she had placed beside her. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden movement. Just a simple action. She opened it slowly. Inside were documents. Official ones. Clean, organized, prepared long before there. Marriage. She slid one paper toward him. He looked down at it. At first he didn't understand what he was seeing. His eyes moved over the text again and again. Ownership records. Legal structures. Dates that went back years. His breathing changed. She explained calmly. She said her family believed in quiet planning, in protecting the future without display. She said what she owned had never been something she felt the need to announce. He felt his confidence begin to crack. She showed him more papers, property details, shares, accounts managed legally and independently. Everything clear, everything real. He tried to speak, but no words came out. She wasn't finished. She explained that the prenup he insisted on had never threatened her security. She said signing it cost her nothing. She said she agreed because it revealed something important about how he viewed Marriage. That was when it hit him. The power he thought he held had never existed. He leaned back in his chair, stunned. His mind raced. He replayed every moment, every assumption, every confident statement he had made. He asked why she never told him. She answered honestly. She said he never asked. She said he was more interested in protecting himself than understanding her. Those words hurt more than the documents. He felt exposed for the first time. He saw how his need for control had blinded him. She told him she wasn't sharing this to embarrass him or gain advantage. She said she believed clarity was necessary before making any decision. About helping him? She said partnership should be based on respect, not convenience. He sat silently for a long time. The fear he had been carrying now had a new shape. He realized how close he had come to losing her trust completely. He spoke softly. He admitted he had made assumptions. He admitted he had been afraid of losing what he built. He admitted he hadn't considered her independence. She listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't comfort him. Either she waited for him to finish, then she said something. Simple, she said. Strength does not need to be announced. Those words stayed with him. The conversation didn't end with decisions. There was no agreement that night. No promises. But something had changed. The balance he believed was fixed had shifted. He now understood that. Control without understanding creates distance, and she understood that truth. Once spoken cannot be taken back. As the night grew quiet, both of them sat with new awareness. One was learning humility. The other was deciding what respect truly meant. The final choice was still ahead, but the truth had already changed everything. The days after the truth came out were quiet, but not the kind of quiet that feels empty. It was the kind that forces people to think, to reflect, to face parts of themselves they had ignored. He moved differently now, slower, more careful. The confidence that once filled every room he entered had softened, not disappeared, but changed shape. He spoke less and listened more. She noticed how he asked before making decisions now, how he paused instead of assuming, how his tone carried less certainty and more humility. Nothing was said about what should happen next. There were no dramatic arguments, no accusations, no demands. Just two people living in the same space, processing a truth that had altered the balance between them. He replayed the past in his mind often. The early days of confidence, the prenup conversation, the way he had mistaken silence for agreement. He realized how rarely he had truly asked about her life, how easily he had assumed leadership meant control. That realization stayed heavy. One evening he finally spoke. He said he wanted to apologize, not for being cautious, but for being dismissive. He admitted he had seen marriage as protection instead of partnership. His voice wasn't dramatic. It was honest. She listened carefully. She told him that apology mattered, but understanding mattered more. She said respect grows when people feel seen, not managed. He nodded. They spoke openly for the first time about expectations, about fears, about how both of them had entered the marriage with different ideas of power and security. He admitted that fear had driven many of his decisions. Fear of losing control, fear of failure, fear of appearing weak. She shared that silence had been her way of observing, of understanding whether she was being accepted as a partner or simply placed into a role. The conversation wasn't easy, but it was real. Over the following weeks, he faced consequences outside the home as well. Some opportunities fell through. Some losses couldn't be reversed. He learned that not every mistake can be fixed with confidence. She didn't step in to save him immediately, not because she wanted to punish him, but because growth requires responsibility. He worked through the situation, slowly, carefully, with more humility than before. He learned to ask for advice, to accept limits at home. Their dynamic continued to change. Decisions became shared discussions instead of statements. Silence became conversation. One afternoon, He asked her what she wanted for her future. It was the first time he had asked without expecting a simple answer. She told him she wanted balance, respect, space, to exist as herself without being underestimated. He listened. In that moment, he understood something he had missed for a long time. Strength doesn't come from control, it comes from trust. The prenup, once a symbol of power, now felt like a reminder, not of protection, but of how close they came to misunderstanding each other completely. They didn't tear it up. They didn't celebrate it either. They let it exist as it was, a document that taught a lesson neither of them would forget in the end. The marriage didn't survive because of contracts or assets. It survived because two people chose honesty over ego, and silence, once mistaken for weakness, proved to be wisdom all along.